Hi everyone, my name's Nick and this is Average Nerd DIY. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the different kinds of plaster that were used to build old houses. So if you haven't watched previous videos before, I'm in our new to us 1890 farmhouse, or something like that. We'll call it a farmhouse. And so because this house is so old, and it also underwent a significant renovation probably sometime in the 40s or 50s, it has a lot of the different kinds. I think all of the different kinds of plaster that have been used, except for the most modern kinds. It also has some modern drywall, which I don't think I need to go into. Most people are familiar with drywall. But I just wanted to give a quick overview of how these systems worked and how to recognize them out in the wild, so to speak. And so the first one, which is a little gentle, so I'm going to try not to break it. This is just regular old horsehair plaster, also known as wood lath and plaster. And so if you can see it on the camera, you can actually see the hair coming out. That is horsehair, very old, and there's also a little bit of mold as an added benefit. And so on this piece, you can see actually why it failed and why this plaster typically fails, which is these, what they're called keys. So typically what happens is there are little wood pieces called laths, and those are aligned horizontal on a wall, and then they smush the plaster in between the gaps on those wooden pieces, and that creates what's called a key. So it essentially mushrooms out and then goes behind that wood lath, and then that's what locks it onto the wood lath. As vibrations happen, as moisture changes, as it just gets older and breaks down, those keys eventually break off, as you can see here. And so now we're just left with these grooved lines, and so it pulls away from the lath, or the wood laths. And so this was I believe, one of the earlier or original kinds of plaster. This was the one most common in older homes. And so then we move on to the next kind of plaster, which is the one that's most present in our house. And this is what is called rock lath and plaster. And so this was a model that was used. It's also referred to as mid-century plaster, or lath and plaster. And so this was a model that was used in the 40s or 50s. And the easiest way the most common way I've seen it referred to is as the kind of transition between lath and plaster, as we have behind me, or wood lath and plaster, as we have behind me, and then drywall. And so as you can see, hopefully I'm getting this well on the camera, there's actually what looks to be drywall, and that's because it pretty much is drywall. So this is a gypsum board, just like drywall is. It's got the paper on the back, it's got the seams, just like you would with drywall. But rather than just having that, they would also apply pretty much a full layer of plaster along that wall. And so you can see when you look at the side by side of the old plaster. Here, let's show the better angle. So this side, it's pretty much identical, and that's because it's pretty much the same product. They were just using something different to bind it to. So because that rock can't just, sit on a flat wood wall or, whatever other kind of material they had available, they had to bind it to something. And so they started with wood, and then they moved to this gypsum board. One thing I haven't seen so much on this one is the what they call the button board. And so that would be, typically there would be holes that go through the gypsum board, and then it would mushroom out. So kind of like the keys with the wood lath, it would mushroom out, and that's what would bind it to the board. So this must have been a different technique. We think that this house was done, the renovation was done sometime in the 50s, so they may have had a different technique from that one, and that's why it's functioning this way, or it's just a completely different system and I'm completely wrong. If I am, please let me know in the comments so I can keep educating myself on this. But in any case, so this is really durable. Like, you can still hear, this was, taken out, I think, last week. The funny thing is, I was just looking at it, and it's very irregular on how it was applied. So down here, it's a lot thicker than over here. Not sure why that happened, how that happened, but kind of interesting to see. But anyway, this is really strong, really sturdy. It's also really dense and heavy. So these walls are very solid. I was kind of glad to find out that this is what we had instead of that lath and plaster, or wood lath and plaster, just because of how brittle and temperamental it is. Now, I did skip a stage, and that is this metal lath and plaster. So like I said, this house is funny to have all of the systems, pretty much all of them. The only caveat is this was only used in the corners here. And so this was, it's kind of the equivalent of like modern tape, drywall tape. And then it's also similar to corner beading. So they are both used in kind of the similar components. And so as you can see up here at the top, just the little remnants we have, they would smash that plaster through just like they would with the wood lath, and just like they would do with that the old button board, and then maybe to the similar extent that rock lath. And so they would smash it through, and then this would be the binding agent to keep it from pulling up. This stuff, from what I understand, is also quite durable. It was in relatively good shape, minus some water damage that was in the kitchen. But the issue with this stuff, and I'm very, very glad we don't have it all throughout our house. I was very concerned that that was the case. So the issue with this is that if you are trying to remove it, it is very difficult to get rid of. We got somewhat lucky in that we only had it, as I mentioned, in the corners and in some of the other seams. But this stuff is tough to deal with. So if you're lucky, you can start pulling it this way. But a lot of the times, if you get a good enough grip on it, you're going to start ripping the old wire, especially if it's rusted. And so I'm very glad that this isn't throughout all the house. I've also heard that it's quite difficult for signal, so like Wi-Fi and cell phone signal, just because that metal interferes with it. It's getting, picking up the signal. I don't know how it all works, but in any case, this is just another one of the systems, and I believe it was the precursor to the rock lath and plaster. And so it was essentially, this was the order. So it went wood lath and plaster, metal lath and plaster, and then rock lath and plaster. And then they transitioned to drywall. The other system, the modern system I mentioned earlier that I don't believe we have in this house, is essentially a blue board or just some kind of gypsum board that can accept the plaster, accept a veneer of plaster. So you put on a 1/2 inch of blue board, and then you put about an 1/8 inch of a plaster veneer on it. It gives it that kind of durability on the outside. It gives it that solid look, and some of the character and charm of that plaster element. But in any case, I just wanted to share that real quick in case you're trying to identify that, as I said earlier, in the wild. But I hope this video was helpful. If you have any thoughts, if there's anything I got wrong, please let me know down in the comments. And then if you like this video, please make sure to like and subscribe. I'll also be doing a video later on some of the techniques I found to cut this rock lath and plaster. Because it was a transitory material, there's not much information on it. It was only from the 40s or 50s, so there's a lot more information on the wood lath and plaster, and then drywall obviously is everywhere. But there's a lot more information on the wood lath and plaster than this rock lath and plaster. So I'll be putting some materials together to show you how to cut this, or how I found works best to cut it. Anyway, make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye!